Okay, so welcome to this another video of this tutorial series. In this video, we are gonna learn about HTML forms. Now, forms are very important for HTML web pages as they provide multiple functionality to our web pages. Like if we want, we want someone to sign up to our web page, or we want someone to upload his number, his name, his address, or his email address. All these things include the usage of forms. Okay, so the three basic tags that are used to create forms are: first, the form tag; second, the input tag; and third is the label tag. We'll go over all these one by one, and we will start with the input tag. So let's do the coding part. Okay, so before starting with the forms, I want to mention that this is the uh, code solution for the assignment I gave you in the last video. So pause the video and go over it if you have any doubts. Okay, so before starting with forms, I would request all you to create a separate file for the forms, because we are going to make a lot of changes and I don't want your last data to be removed. So create this file called forms.html. So to create the basic boilerplate, write HTML5 and click on tab. Now if you don't know how this happens, please go on to please see last few minutes of my first video where I have told you how to install HTML5 boilerplate and live server. So the basic first we'll remove this unneeded part. So the first tag, basic tag we're gonna see is the input tag. So input tag takes this basic attribute that you have to mention, which is called the type attribute. This specifies the type of input that we are going to give, that as a user would give as an input. So here he will give the input as a text. So if I save this and open with live server, I would see this box appearing here. So this is the input space that I have been provided by the HTML. And if you can see, I can write here text. Okay, so this is the text input. Now I'll just copy paste this and type here number, and again save this. You will see another box, and this here takes an input as a number, and you can also see this arrow keys appearing. If I click on the upper arrow, the value increases, and if I click on the downwards arrow, the value decreases. Now you don't see forms with empty boxes. You obviously need something or a text at the side of the boxes to tell what type of input it is. So for that we use the label tag. So we write label and give a specific label that you want. Like I would give a name, and here I would give it number. Save this, and you can see this name with a box, input box, number with a input box. Similarly, you can also add another type of inputs, like if you want to add a checkbox. So you can just write here input type equals checkbox. Close this and save this, and you can see here a small checkbox has appeared. If I click onto this, tick mark appears, and if click again, the tick disappears. Okay, so there are also other type of input tags, like okay, one more thing you don't need to mention here, the closing input tag. As input tag is, it's also a self-enclosing tag, just like the image tag. So it would also just work fine. If I save this, and you can still see the boxes here, so you don't need to add in closing input tag. Okay, so other types of input tags are Like if I write type equals to color and save this, so I would get a color selection box here. If I click onto this, I get this box here. You can select a particular color of your choice. Then there is another tag which has a type equals to password. So if I save this, you can see now whatever I type here is hidden inside these dots. So just as we write passwords, one more type is there which has of a type equals to a radio. So radio buttons are like these small circles that you can see. Like if you have seen there in certain forms, there are options like if you want to have to select your gender, then it is like male and female, and you have to click a particular dot. So these are radio buttons. If you see, if I click onto this, a black dot appears here, and if I click it again, oh no, for now it would not disappear. We have to add some other functionality that we will see later. Okay, so one more type of input tag there is which has a type equals to submit. Okay, so what does this submit does? It's self-explanatory. Whatever values I type onto this form uh, and save on and if you want to submit it to a certain place, then we would use this submit tag. If I just click onto this, and it would go to the specified location that I mentioned. So these are the basic input tags that are used in HTML and that are used in forms. So adding more to the information of input tags, starting with the radio buttons. As you have seen, when we click on a radio button, it gets checked, but when we re-click it, it does not get unchecked. So why does this happen? See, radio buttons does not behave like check boxes where you can check and uncheck them. Actually, radio buttons are linked. For example, there are two radio buttons, one having a caption of male and one having a caption of female. So the logic works like this: is these two are linked. If I check the first radio button, the other gets unchecked, and if I check onto the second one, the first gets unchecked. So let's see an example. If I give here another radio button, type equals to radio, and let's just give them labels to differentiate them. Just save this, and you can see here two radio buttons with one of male and another of female. So right now what happens is, if we click on this, you will see that it gets checked, and if we click on this, this also gets checked. This happens because these two right now are separate entities. These are not linked together. So how do we link them? We just have to create an attribute here with the same name and value. So I would create here an attribute with the name of name and give it a value of gender, and same attribute in this radio button, name with the value equals to gender. So just save this, and you can see here that if I click here, it gets checked, and now if I click here, this gets checked and this gets unchecked. So these two now are linked. So this is how radio buttons work in HTML. Also, another important attribute to consider is the placeholder. Like if you want to show some text initially in the input box, not just the empty box, so you can write here placeholder like this. Placeholder equals to the value that you want to show. Like this is the input field for name, so I would write here enter name, and if I save this, you can see this now the input input tag with the name caption has the placeholder enter name. Similarly, you can also add a placeholder for the number input. Just change this value to enter number and save this, and you can see here enter number. So this is another important attribute which is called the placeholder attribute. Okay, so another important attribute is the name attribute. Like you have name, I have a name, and whenever someone has to uh, in someone has to call us or mention us, he uses our name. Similarly, input tags have names. So whenever someone we want to process the information that we receive in the input tag, we use the name attribute. So HTML does not process information; it is done by JavaScript, jQuery, or some other frameworks like React. So it's just an attribute that provides a name to the input, so that input tag, so that we can use the value that is provided by that input tag. So you can give this any name, like in input field, and that's all. So whenever we have to process the information by this input tag, we would use the name as input field. Another attribute is value attribute. So it is just a way to initialize your input box. Like at present there is nothing inside the input box, just a placeholder. But what if we want to reload the page such that we have a value already entered into it? So I will just give it a value like Steven, any name you can enter, and I'll just save this. And if I see the page here now, you can see here I see the name Steven. If I erase this, the placeholder appears. If I enter some other value and submit that, you can do this. And if I again reload the page, you again see the input tag with the name Steven. So these are all the basic attributes and input tags that we are gonna see use in HTML. That's all for this video. If in the next video we're gonna see some other functionalities of the form tag, and we're also gonna create a proper form with all these tags. So that's all for this video. If you like this video, do subscribe this channel and like this video and share this video with your friends. Thank you and happy learning.